been having a Bible study and that question has come up, and what do you think?
I feel like each of us answer, because I think this is admittedly a question that I think that we should all begin with the agreement that it's viewed differently by different people, and different people have equally biblically sound answers for that. So I think it might be more beneficial to say, how do you interpret that to each one of us, so that we're not stepping on each other's toes. So I'll begin by saying that it's something that I have personally struggled with. You have Paul, probably the most strong language in 1 Timothy, limiting the role of a woman speaking inside of the church. Very much limiting that. But then you also have New Testament evidence of deaconesses. You have Old Testament Deborah serving as a judge. And some people explain those kind of things away, saying, well, there was no male to serve as judges at that time. But at the end of the day, the Spirit of the Lord fell on Deborah, and she served in that capacity. There were deaconesses in the early church, Jesus, the first, you might say evangelist in a sense, was the two women that Jesus turned to and said, hey, go tell my disciples about this. So I think that all of that together, you may see a contradiction, but a way of understanding it might be, some people right off maybe say Paul's letter and say, well, it's just the context, Paul was speaking in that time, it doesn't apply to our time. But the problem that I find with that personally is that if you're going to do that, you pretty much find yourself in a situation where you kind of have to question a lot of Paul's writing. Okay? So I would say that a very helpful thing for me in understanding it is understanding that Paul is writing how I understand it to be pastorally. So he might be writing pastorally to a circumstance, addressing a situation in a church, but not necessarily speaking universally silencing women in full regard. So I look throughout the New Testament and I can see that as probably an answer. So 1 Timothy is probably the strongest language limiting women, but throughout I think you see use of women being allowed to speak. And I guess my contemporary sort of take on it would be that a lot of churches that want to limit a woman's role, like speaking in the church or being a leader, saying like, oh, a woman can't be a senior pastor, or a woman can't do this or that. They don't really have sound logic all the way throughout, because when Paul's talking, he's saying, I don't let a woman speak or teach a man. So, really, if you're going to let a woman speak from a pulpit, I don't think that there's much of a difference between letting a woman say a benediction or speak scripture or something like that. So, in my mind, a sound, rational way of looking at it, if you're really read Paul that way, then you really need to be pretty strict and say, something like some pastors that have said, we just don't let women speak in church. I can respect that because at least they're being true to how they understand their reading of Paul.
Dave? I'll jump ship. I'm a male chauvinist bit. I don't ask my wife to be submissive. She chooses to be submissive. When the Baptist Convention came out with a document that said that wives must be submissive, and I told my wife, I love you. Your first job is to obey me. So you tell me what to do. And so anytime you're bossing me, you're being submissive to me. She said, I like that. All right, and that's how I answer that, okay? Because I didn't want to be in trouble with conventions, but my wife is a strong manager, and I'm a strong manager. I'm over the top, and she's over the top. You just have to watch us every now and then tag team. Mark seen it, it's phenomenal. But if you look at it from a conservative point of view, people will be like, whoa, your wife needs to step off. I'm like, no, I'm not going to tell her to step off. I need that. I'm strong. I need to tell her first. I have 3 daughters, okay? I've had a really struggle with this. I've worked with chaplains that are female. They give pastoral guidance when people die. They are full-fledged ministers at that moment of death. That is phenomenal. So The way that I reconcile it, and me and Mark have had debates about this for years, but the one for me that helps me reconcile, and you gotta still understand, this is Dave Dover, still don't show this too, okay? I don't like a female boss. I'm not gonna lie. That's Dave Dover in the flesh. I think Paul's saying that too, Timothy. I don't want that. I don't enjoy a female boss. But I have everybody in my world is my boss, and of course they're all females. And every mission trip I've been on, I've had more females. Okay? There's a scripture, I believe it's Acts, and God's Spirit report upon all flesh. It doesn't distinguish between male and female. And so that's how I answer that, and I try to do that. If my daughters want to preach, I'm going to pray over them and bless them. The problem that I struggle with, if my wife is ever called to preach, when I read the letters there, how am I the head of the household? And I can't reconcile that. And there was a girl pastor here, and man, I've read over it, and I've struggled with it. I met her husband, and I was like, huh. So I don't have an answer. But if you know a girl who wants to preach, and there's a pulpit available, man, if she can outdo a guy, I'll endorse it. Because I've had students for years, they better Bible studies than guys, preach better than guys. And I cannot distinguish whether God's hand is upon them or not. Mark can testify. I've had lots of students who said they were called by God, they were out there doing ministry, and then they failed God miserably. Full of sin. So if they can fail God full of sin, so can a girl. And that's what some people go, well, I don't want to know who you're about. Really? What about this guy over here? And in this town, if you talk to the elderly, they call preachers plumbers, painters, liars, and thieves. Because there's no difference. And if you've lived in this town long enough to be 85 or whatever, every preacher in this area, no matter which denomination, failed God miserably. Which is the sin of all man anyway. So, male and female, we're all going to do it. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to fail. But when I read Scripture, I see God's Spirit poured upon all flesh. And I can't look at you and say, well, God didn't anoint you to be a pastor. Now, if you become a pastor, sweetie, I'm not sure I'll join your church. Now, I'll hang out here and preach. But my male flesh says, I can't do that. And I struggle. And that's my weakness. But you want to preach, man, I'll hear you sing. And if it's good, I'll hear you. And I might even steal your ideas. Ian Bound says, are you fresh? And I might be struggling. I'm like, wow, that's a better sermon off the floor. Why don't we check that one up and go find the floor? That's me. I got a race. Love you guys. Hey, safe. You know, take care.
Good seeing you.
I'll take your seat.
Hey, come on down. Here, give me a check.
Hey, how's it going?
See you later.
I don't think I'm a male chauvinist, but I'm going to go a step further than he did. Because of the Timothy passage, and it's not just I don't permit a woman to speak or to exercise authority. There's that tag on there. And I feel exactly the same way he does, but why not? I look through the Bible and I see, all the people that would say, all the great women who stepped into the role and met the call of God. You see Phoebe who's a deaconess. You see, what's her name? And you see women being used mightily. You see Jesus and Paul both loving women and encouraging and uplifting and strengthening and empowering women. And the strange thing is that I kind of get this more from my life than anywhere else. There just seems to be something, and I think it's built into the bent of the male and the female. The men date back to the garden, Adam and Eve. What roles did they fulfill? The woman stepped out and took charge and said, I'm going to eat. The man stepped back, shirked his responsibility, and chose to be passive. And so there's an aspect where I think maybe that is playing into the roles that God sets up and says, okay, women, you might be able to do it better than he can, but as an act of humility. I'm not going to plant a flag on that. I'm not going to let it be something that divides. Out there where I live, China Springs, churches are all, I mean, we interact and we cooperate, we do all kinds of things. Methodist Church out there, female pastor, Jane, awesome woman, godly woman. You know, we've done things really good, really happy. You know, we can break bread together, we can cooperate, do stuff together. I just, you know, it's not a divisive issue, but it's one that I look at and go, I don't know that that is the way you put it to be. All kinds of wonderful, awesome roles that women can fill. I just think maybe because of the spiritual issues at work, there's something where God says, it's not a matter of what you can or can't do. I'm asking you in humility to step back. So I'm not going to plant a flag on that. Sorry, I don't want to die on it, but there as well.
Man. Sometimes an idiot opens his mouth. I'll be an idiot. People get crazy trying to turn this book into a formula, like, and find patterns that they can predict what should happen in the future for. The hard truth is that God acts different in the lives of different people at different times. And there are women that God anointed mightily, and there are women that lied to Peter about how much they sold their field for. And there will be women this year that are called to ministry. There will be women that want to be called to ministry and become just completely sin-covered dirt pastors like me. You know, God will do. There's not a pattern here. You'll never find it. Like God made it that way. And so God affirms women at some periods of time and some women at some points of their life. And he affirms some men at some points of their life, and he squashes other men at other points of their life. I'm not a person that thinks that there's any sort of pattern here. Just stories about the way Yahweh has lived in the past.
I think if I can tag on to that, just to add to what I said, just briefly, is that part of the issue is that it seems to be a struggle. You know, when we think about it in terms of our rights, we're really, we don't have rights to be pastors. We don't have the right to do that. We don't have the right to preach a sermon. We don't have the right to minister to people. And neither do women. Nobody has that right. God calls people, you know. So I appreciate that about Josh's comment that if we think about it more in terms of God's call and what He calls you to do, and more than in terms of what's my right to do, I think that's probably a better way to look at it. So yeah.
I wish I had the right to quit.